Hello everyone, Gaian here, and I wanted to show you how you can better manage your I don't even know how to describe. This has been what's been preventing me from making this video. Um, what I'm calling them are field influencers. So you'll know exactly what I'm describing. Do you see all of these random blocks that are triggers? And if you don't know this, these are triggers. You can see that it's a cube that's invisible, and obviously when stuff happens inside of it, you can trigger things or identify that something's happened. So what it is that in most cases with games and us as people, we assume, or like it's an apt thing to surmise, is let's see. Well, here. Um, we have these fields. And so then in this case, what they are is that when you enter them, they'll change something about the gameplay, and that's why I call them influencers. And it's a very common principle of, you enter this cube, and then we set indoor lighting mode or indoor walking mode. So in my examples, I have a camera profile changer and a movement profile changer. So, you can switch cameras dynamically, like based on where you are, and movement based on where you are. Um, and it's been something that I've used since the dawn of time, since my very first projects. And in that same vein, it's also one of the things that I have not upgraded until 7 years later. So I'm just going to kind of describe what we kind of often think in these cases. So it's like I've got this movement field. I'm going to make it much teenier. And you go, okay, if this is going to be a little weird perspective wise. So, if I go, I want to move slowly here, and then I want to move fastly here, you know, then when you walk here, you move slowly, and then you go over here and you move fast. And it makes a lot of sense. But then it's like, okay, well, but what happens when you're in between? You're moving slow, then and then you're moving fast. So then it's like, okay, no, that makes sense. Uh, just take this one and bring it over and bring it over. There, right? So then you go from one into the next. So once you leave this, you've already touched the next one. Now, this is kind of how I was doing Del Lago layover, is that I had to meticulously test and retest and retest and retest so that when I step off, this deactivates me, and then this one activates me as I enter into it in the same step. And this was really nuts because, of course, you could tap, tap, tap like a game player, like a person trying to exploit things, and land right in the middle. And what happens then? A lot of weird stuff. Sometimes the camera just goes between the two. Sometimes it just sets to something or breaks, all sorts of things that we all know. And then there's more questions. So, how do you leave one and enter the other? And the reason why I mentioned that, and I didn't allude to before, is that what happens when you're in here? You're here, you walk over here, and now you've triggered the second one, and now you've replaced the first one, and now you're in the middle. So you can't walk backwards to this area and have it return to what it was. You just essentially walk outside of this one to nothing because you never left this one. And this is where the conundrum happens, because then you start getting complicated situations where it's like, now when you're in this middle piece, which of the four do you get? Or if you walk diagonally through this, you're hitting like 8 of them and leaving some and leaving and entering some in the middle of processing, entering another one, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, this system does not work at all. And we get what I've been struggling with for eons, where what was actually happening is that I started to fix this years ago by having a little cookie, a little memory of what was the last field. So if I get back to, if I leave one into the next, and then I leave the next, but nothing, I don't enter a new one, it just goes, okay, what was the last one you were at? Because obviously if you're not in the first one, then you're in the one that you were in before. And that's kind of assuming from the perspective of like what a lot of these actually are, which are, there's a global world move, and then there's a inside the world, inside the building. That's a different kind of move. So, you go into the building and then you come back out and, well, go to the last one, which is the global one. But then you start getting to this, which is you go from the global one into this one, and then into this one. And then you leave out into the global one, and it puts you in the last one, which is one that you're not even involved with. It has nothing to do with anything. And now, when you walk back into the second one, now it ends up being not okay. So, how do you resolve this? Well, I propose that you make what I'm calling a field influence queue. Now, if you're a programmer, the term queue is a little overloaded here. I'm not actually talking about a programmatic queue, a list that you enter in the back and then you exit in the front, like a marquee, like a queue to a movie, but rather that when you enter a field, the influence joins the rest in the queue and basically kind of votes for their turn or attempts to try their influence. So what happens is that I've got an influence pool, which are the influences, and basically when I add an influence, i.e. you've stepped into it, it checks, hey, does the influence pool already have the influence that we're trying to change to? So like I was saying in the game here is, sorry, what was I saying? If it already has, so let's say you've got your globe, oops, I'm almost there, I swear, I'm almost there. Here we go. There we go. So let's say you have your global one, so this one's free camera, and then you have this one in here, which is like survival horror fixed camera, and then you have a free camera inside. Now, in a lot of things where you'd arguably take a list, you'd just take a list of all three of these. So there'd be list 0, which is the first entry, and that's global, and then list 1, which is the second one, would be the fixed camera, and then number 2 would be, oh geez, my keyboard is, there we go. Number 2 would be, which is the third entry, the free camera again. But then it goes to say, like, this list is linear, you're going 3, 2, 1 kind of thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the list can be accessed in a different order, so 3, 1, 2. Sometimes the middle one can get removed and 0 and 2 still exist, and so then, well, again, we're starting to have the logic crumble down, and what happens is that then you lose track of which entry, which volume you're within that is the dominant one for you. So I do one specialty thing. I don't just do a list. I do the object that we're trying to influence, to add the influence. So in this case, I'm doing it very generic so that I can inherit towards doing a movement field influencer. So whatever this generic object is, in this case for movement fields, it's a movement profile. So what happens, so in the case of our here, we have only 2 camera types, free move and fixed camera, or free camera and fixed camera, but we have 3 cubes. So in this influencer, what it actually will do is it will add both of the free cameras to the list with the free camera, and just adds the influencer inside. So what ends up happening is that in the free cameras list, there's actually 2 influencers, and every influencer has a weight, which, if you can see over here, is 1. And when you finally, make your change to the list of influences, either removing or adding, all you do is you just sort the influences. And this is kind of the queuing. This is where queuing isn't the actual programmatic thing. Queuing, you just take one off and add one in and blah, 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 blah. This is just sorting. You're going through the list and you're checking all of the entries and you're going, hey, how many influencers are voting for you? And what is their voting weight? So the test weight plus influencer weight is, well, in this simple case of, in the simple case of this, it's like if they're all weighted as 1, then it's free move gets 1, free camera gets 1, fixed camera gets 1, and then free camera gets 1 again, which now makes it so that fixed camera or free camera has 2 and fixed camera has 1, therefore making our teeny guy here, arguably these two, the dominant influence, and therefore the inside movement profile in this case that I have targeted is the dominant influencer. And so then the cool thing about this is that you can start to see how it ends up being quite pliable. Because if we start going like this, and you're standing somewhere in here, what influencer is there going to be? And it's like, it actually doesn't matter at all, because if you're standing in this tiny one inside all of these 7 layers of influencers, they're going to be adding whatever they do, 1, 3, 2, 4, 8, all the way down to the inside. And then the moment you click over to this guy, it's going to rebind to not this one, but more of these guys, and et cetera, et cetera. And there you go. You now have it able to discern through a mixed webbing of hierarchical stepping into all sorts of influencers. You get the one that you want. So you can consider this a weighted priority list, but it's not quite, because there's those extra layers of the priority list has 2 tiers of influence, and yeah, there's some extra to it. But I wanted to get one last step in, and I kind of alluded to it, which is I've made this generic. So the key detail to this is that I want to have all sorts of influencers. Lighting modes, camera modes, movement modes, sound effect modes, like anything you want to modulate and alter the presentation or the experience of the game in a way that has no, again, hierarchy where it's like, this is better than that. When it's just, oh, this could happen or that could happen, it's all lateral. You need to discern what is the influence going to be at the end of the thing. Sorry, but what I was getting at is with generics. So the point is, I just wanted to make this field influence queue once. I wanted to conceive of this concept, oh, there's a voting target, and then there's the voters, and then they have their influence, and therefore the summation of their influence then discerns the vote of what influence gets it. But did I, in any point of describing this generic mechanism, say the camera influence or the lighting profile influence? No, because all it is an influencer or an influence as dictated by the influencers, and that's where it stops. So then, using inheritance, as you may know in programming, you then inherit from the field influence queue to make a movement field influence queue. And in the movement field influence queue, I don't do anything but say, hey, I'm changing what apply influence does. And what it requires is that I need my character's stats, because I am going to be affecting stats. And my current influence needs to exist. That's obviously an important one. And so then, if that all works, then change the movement profile, because I'm applying the influence. All the rest, the remove influence, the sort influence, it's happening like it used to, like it was before. And so then, by doing this, you can make really little niche, functional, targeted things that all stem from a core. And in my case, I really love it because then you can go, hey, I need to find all my field influence cues, whether they're movement or camera or lighting profile or whatever, and you could just search for their parent class, the thing that they inherit from. And so there's lots of ways to filter and mitigate conflicts and stuff by being able to then go, okay, I'm going to check the field influencer cues, but then discern if it's a movement and or a light one and do two different things because of that. That sounds stupid. That's not a very good logical thing because you could just search for each. but you start to get my point. And so then I guess just to close off, because I think I did a pretty okay job at sharing that. Well, just to finish it through. The influencer is the other side of the cue, and so the cue is on the player. Say for camera changes, the influencer is the actual boxes. See, movement field influencer. And again, it's generic. It has an influence type, the target, which is just so generic, you can't get any very much more generic. It's got its weight, and then it's got the collider so that it knows the triggers stuff. But all it does, when it enters the queue, add the influence. When it exits, remove it. And then just some extra stuff just to handle some extra shit. But I wanted to show you, do not save this. This is live, push it to Git. House Bellworth. You then start to find yourself being able to do all these things where you've got, man, it's not the greatest of examples. Well, here. So it's like you come out from the basement, which right now is not seamed together. And in here, you have an inside movement field. And then kind of halfway, between inside and outside, it turns into both. There's two. There's a camera and a movement. Outside cam and movement thing. Yeah, there's two. Yeah, see, and I don't even have to worry about it. Just make it blanket the whole world, and that's fine. And this inside one will still work because the weight is number 2. And so then the global ones are all 1. And so then this one trumps it until you step out onto the stoop and everything goes to normal. Now, I have had 1 or 2 instances where it doesn't quite work. And I'm pretty sure it's not completely my fault. So one of the funny things about the way that Unity does their collision boxes, and this is, it's a thing where I'm so grateful that it's not me that is the problem, in the sense that it's a faultiness of my logic. But it's that when you have your character, when you have your Wolfgang, and you put them here, if you change him to is kinematic, kinematic means that it's not part of collisions. It just is. It's this absolute boundary that just sits there like a god. Unity removes it from the calculations of collisions, of like physics bouncing around collisions. And the reason why is because it's optimized, so it saves processing time. If you have 5 million billion kinematic things, then it's not going to calculate 5 million billion I'm still sitting exactly where I was last time calculations. It just doesn't calculate them. But in transitioning in and out of kinematic, you become basically invisible to the entire hierarchy of fields. Yeah, look, I have slight movement changes when you're on the patios and on decks because obviously there's people eating and there's like a barbecue and it's more narrow and less easy to move. When you do that, basically all of these just go away, and then when you unkinematic, they come back. And so they unprocess and reprocess you when you do that. And you may go, okay, well, but why are you making your character kinematic? They have to be able to move around and bounce off walls and stuff like that. Well, I have a small parkour system. And what happens is that when you go and you're parkouring from the floor up to the top of your little fence or whatever, it would just do a straight line through. It would do just a straight line like just a straight line like that. But if the fence collider box is like this, you end up just jamming on this corner piece, and in some cases, you just get stuck there. So then the thing just keeps looping, trying to get you to your target point, but you can't. And that's because this whole part of the collider is colliding with you and you're just getting bounced away. So if you go to kinematic, you just completely mitigate all of this, and you just go inert and you pass right through. And then you turn back collision. And so then you're on top of it and you land on top and you're good. But in that process, you just left my region loader, you left the movement influencers, you left the camera influencers, and then when you come back and you're on top of the fence and everything restores, it now enters one, calculates it, sorts it, enters the next one. Now there's two, calculates it, sorts it, enters the third one. Calculates, sorts it. Oops, now you just went off the fence and back on the fence 2 milliseconds later. Okay, cancel all of those. Now enter the first one, right? And oh Lord. Oh Lord. So that's actually something that can be changed a little bit in the physics settings here and in how you solve some of this stuff. So for example, all I did with this parkour is I just got rid of this kinematic setting. And yeah, you bounce off the thing and sometimes it'll break and stuff like that. But what I ended up resolving is this game doesn't need parkour. I'm going to make something different that doesn't utilize the parkour because I'd rather utilize all of these influencers until I know a better way to do the parkour. Of course, you can do all sorts of things as well. You can turn the collision into triggers, or the better answer is to change these on trigger enter and on trigger exits into on trigger stay, which happens every single frame, so long as it's inside. So if you cancel out and cancel back in, well, that one frame that you were out, it won't check, but the next frame will be in. And you use that to then do dynamic checking, where you have a list or a cache of, okay, what were the guys that were inside of me before? Do I have like a timeout that says, okay, they have to be outside of me for 3 or 5 frames before I remove them? All of these things so that you have a more concrete control of when Unity is deciding that your thing is entered or exited. Because as it stands, older Unities don't have the same processing issue. Well, no. When I say old issue, other versions have different ways of solving this. So I have run into 2 or 3 different cases in different versions of Unities where it's processed differently. This was a big issue I had to fucking struggle with the game Rube Goldberg Workshop, because the game had so much reliance on being inside of other things and affecting things by what they're inside of, but with the added need to pause the game and reset and stuff like that. So you'd literally have things vanish from outside of the game and appear inside a trigger, but it was programmatic and therefore the trigger wouldn't detect it or stuff. Or when you'd pause and you'd make everything static and stand still, they would all untrigger everything, and holy, it is a mess. But the problem is that on trigger stay happens every frame, so you have to have very, very concrete logic so that the most often times it just escapes out and the least often times it steps through. Because, well, guess what? I keep going to OBS, when we have all of these on top of each other, and even more so because this is only camera and movement, I need lighting, I need post-processing effects, those kinds of things, you now have dozens, if not hundreds, of influencers updating every on trigger stay. So that's probably going to be the next iteration of my influencer system structure, in that it will have the ability to absolutely maintain a record of when, where, and why everything's happening with itself. But needless to say, where I've gotten now has been a vast improvement over where I was, and now in the next demo that I am trying to release this month. And you'll see it in full effect, but of course you won't know because it will just be working as opposed to not working as it was in previous versions. So hopefully this covers that kind of stuff. If you want to know a little bit more about, like the actual logic within these things, or how I broke it down at first and stuff, let me know and I'd love to chat about it. Otherwise, I hope that you have learned some good ways to improve your trigger influencing abilities in your world. Thanks for coming, and I hope to show you guys some more cool stuff that I've been learning. See ya!